We are all waking up to remember that we are the creators of this matrix. What does that specifically mean? In the last video, we talked a little bit about dimensions. And when you break down those dimensions, they go dimensions 1 through 9. And I get a lot of contest around people saying that there are more than 9 dimensions. And yes, there are infinite dimensions. But no matter what dimension that you go into, every number always breaks down to what we call a digital root that centers on a number 1 through 9. So take the number 12, for instance. 1 plus 2 equals 3. Now you're back in the third dimension again. Every number, everything we experience, everything that we see that we've given a name to, every letter that we talk about can be broken back down into these digital root values. And the reason that it's so important for us to understand these numbers 1 through 9 in these dimensions is because it allows us to recognize what we're creating in our life, why it shows up the way that it is, and what is that recognition for us based on where we are in our rhythmic pattern of ascension. Ascension is a process of always on evolution. What that means is that you may be living at the 9th dimension one day and you may be at the 1st dimension the next day. And oftentimes we judge ourselves because we go from one to another and we think that there's a hierarchy because we think that 9 is better than 1, or we think that 5 is better than 4. And none of them are better than another. We're all the same. And that matters for us as human beings. And that's also pertinent as it relates to each one of these dimensions that we are learning about right now. We talked a little bit about dimensions 1 through 4 last time. So the first dimension is the dimension of setting the seed. It's what brings everything to life. The second dimension is the integration of that seed. So imagine you take a seed, you put it in the ground. That's dimension 1. The second dimension is the process of nurturing and rooting. That's the integration process. It grabs hold of the soil and it takes root in your life. So whenever you see the number 1, you're initiating something. You see the number 2, you're in the process of rooting and integrating. You see the number 3, and that process is shaking things up so that you can get some more seeds out of this tree, or out of the seed that you've planted in order to do more, in order to multiply. That's also the process of going deep within yourself. And we talked a little bit last time about how each of us lives in the 2nd dimension framework. We rarely understand the depth of ourselves. We rarely go through this process of what we call self-love. And we then judge the illusion outside of us because the illusion is only a reflection of ourselves. So no wonder why many things in our lives are very surface level. Relationships are surface level. We don't have deep conversations with individuals. We're consistently talking about the past. You know what I'm talking about. It's that what we call NPC game, and people are just going through the same patterns over and over and over again. But when you conquer and master this 3rd dimensional framework, and you have a depth within yourself, people will start to recognize the rhythm that you're putting out into the world. It's a really beautiful thing when you get into it. We talked about the 4th dimension, which is time. And what we've been tricked to believe is that there's this linear construct of time that leads us from the past, present, and the future. It's a valuable model and system for us to be able to reference the past so we don't lose our minds, and then at which point we can create a very predictable future based on the past. It's a crazy loop that we get stuck in. When we understand 2 things about time. 1, time is not a linear construct of the way that it's been constructed. Time has the ability to eliminate itself when we collectively see it that way as humanity. And what I mean by that is we're not eliminating time from a bypassing perspective. We are starting to take the curvature of time and be able to look at the things that have happened in our past, reference them as a coordinate of space and time, so we know exactly when something happened and where, and then we change the energy of how we feel about that, so that what ends up happening then is it creates a ripple effect into the now, and we start to become more abundant beings. It's a really beautiful process. And Robert Wheeler did an experiment in 2007 called the Delayed Choice Quantum Eraser, where he proved that how you view time now scientifically will change the effects of how things happened from a coordinate perspective in the past. So when we can do that as human beings in our lives on a daily basis, what will start to happen is all of the trauma, all the sadness, all the sickness, all the death and destruction, all the things that we have referenced as suffering will now be healed. And imagine you start to become the cause creator of your life right now, and you're no longer stuck in this past rhythmic cycle that keeps you from being the most abundant being in your life now. When each of us does this and we do it as a collective, this whole human construct starts to change. We move beyond the space and time limitations, and they become concepts of frequency that move us into the fifth dimension. And that's what we're going to talk about now. The fifth dimension is a dimension of frequency, vibration, and energy. It's a dimension of what a lot of individuals who are religious would call spirit. And when you master the fifth dimension, what takes place in that space is that you no longer look at things as good and evil. You recognize that good and evil has to serve the present moment. The good and evil has to serve the space that you're in. You have a consistent understanding of acceptance. So when you look at anything that's taken place in your life, you can accept it, you can honor it, and you can apply love to it. This is the dimension of pure alchemy. And for those of us that are truly mastering this dimension, we no longer stand in a space of righteousness. We no longer have judgment toward anything in our lives. We no longer look at anything as good or bad. We might get caught in that language sometimes, but we constantly check and correct ourselves because we're no longer in the space of judging anything. We recognize that this had to exist for something else to take place. I'll take my sexual abuse that happened with me, or me attempting to take my life. I have such a beautiful reverence for life right now because of me attempting to end myself at certain points, that the way that I live is in full abundance because I'm in constant gratitude and appreciation for everything. And I no longer live in the suffering of that. I no longer have the chip on my shoulder that puts me in a space of me thinking that woe is me and everybody needs to feel sorry for me. And in addition to that, you take the sexual abuse aspect of what took place in my life. I no longer look at that situation and use it as a crutch in order for me to feel less worthy about myself. I leverage that situation to be truly abundant, to be able to use my voice to help other individuals who have hidden their voice because they feel shame over what happened. I feel no shame about what happened at that point in my life. I know it was the most abundant gift that I could have given myself from now. It didn't feel like a gift then, but it is a gift now. I'm no longer stuck in a rhythmic cycle where I lose myself into thinking that I'm an unworthy being. I help individuals with their journey because they did not recognize how to help themselves. And they can look at me and say, okay, if this guy can do it, I can do it too. And since I've been doing this work, so many beautiful souls have come forward to be able to express this in confidence, in truth, and that vulnerability becomes their strength. In this fifth dimension is a space where we truly surrender. I don't know if you've seen Dr. Strange, but in that movie, his teacher is talking about you can't fight the flow of the river. You have to surrender and go with the flow. And when you go with the flow and you recognize that everything that has happened in your life is part of the current that moves you into a full state of abundance, that is when you start to master this fifth dimension. I'm telling you, it becomes the most beautiful experience of your life because you're not saying, okay, well, this is better or worse. The language that starts to shift for you is moving from good and bad to harmony and disharmony, or to coherence and incoherence. And something incoherent just means it needs to be put back in vibration. I'll use myself as an example and said, hey, Sean, you seem a little bit out of harmony today. I'd be like, oh, tell me what's going on. I'm looking to get back into harmony again. What are you seeing that I'm not seeing? Versus if somebody comes to me and said, Sean, something looks really wrong with you today. Well, what's wrong? And then all of a sudden you start judging yourself. The simple shift in using words like harmony and disharmony really start to open up the vessel for individuals to be in receivership. A key thing to note is that whenever we're out of harmony, it's not the end of the world. And for each of us, as we get into this fifth dimensional framework of standing in harmony, no longer judging that which has happened to any of us, no longer judging those individuals in our life, no longer thinking that we're righteous. And this is when we master the concept of spirit in the fifth dimension, the energy, the vibration, the frequency. We start moving as pure, energetic, and frequency-based beings. And now we're able to do magical things inside of the first four dimensions between space and time. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Now, if you're still with me, please make sure to subscribe, like, and comment on the page, because that's the only way that this information starts trending and gets out to those beyond yourself. Now, let's get into the sixth dimension a little bit. And this is about the divine, God's, source, or your higher self, whatever you want to call it, plan for you. Now, I'm not going to get into dogma here, but each of us comes into this world at a very specific frequency. Imagine this. Nobody's born from the same person at the same place, at the same time, at the same second that you're born. You are literally brought into this world at a very specific frequency. The time and space is a version of that frequency put into vibration in this world. The divine spirit that brings you in has a very specific intention for you. And that's these first 5 dimensions coming to life. You kind of see what we're mapping here. And when you get into the 6th dimension, you have a very specific plan for your life. There's something that you are here to do. And most of us don't ever figure it out until it's a little bit too late. And then we come back and we do the thing over again. And every one of us has what we call a grounded purpose and a divine purpose. This grounded purpose is what you are here to do in the 6th dimension. Some of us have gifts of voice. Some of us have gifts of cooking, singing, dancing. We use our physical bodies in specific ways. Some people have beautiful minds and ways of thinking. But each and every one of us has a very specific purpose here on this earth. And where most of us get lost is that we get stuck in the 2nd dimension of looking at the external illusion with our senses, never going deep within. Very few of us become present. Most of us judge our creation. Most of us stand in righteousness. Most of us take all of the stuff that we've learned from the initiation and the integration steps without having any depth. And what we do is we think we're really good at this initiation and integration process. And we have no concept of depth. We can't shake the tree to get more seeds off of it. Therefore, we don't multiply. This is how we have to get in our divine feminine energy. We'll talk about that on future videos. But when we get stuck in these first 2 dimensions and we can't go through this ascension process, we very rarely reach our purpose. And most individuals on their deathbed, or we have our life flash in front of our eyes, is we rapidly move through the aspect of depth. We look at, oh my gosh, I have to be present and get through this time thing. I have to quit judging the world and stop being so righteous. And then we start to really understand our purpose. None of us have to have our life flash in front of our eyes. None of us have to go through this process of death in order to figure this out. All of us have the ability to recognize it right now. And it requires a little bit of what we call ego death, but what I prefer to call it is an ego awakening. It's awakening to the ego within yourself so that you can go so deep that you recognize that your ego is collected with the unity of the all. And once that starts to happen, you don't want to judge anybody because you realize that you're connected to everything. You don't want to not be present because you understand that your presence and your stillness is so important for creation, that you are the cause creator of your life. And then the beautiful thing that happens is the divine plan just starts to roll into you. It literally bombards you like crazy, and there's no other place for you to go than to walk that plan that is given for you from the divine. It is such a beautiful place to be. And those of us that can feel our way into the 6th dimension and really ground and execute on these first 5 dimensions, and they don't have to happen in linear order. That's the confusing thing. It's like we have to get really good at these 2, then we do the next one, then we do the next one, then we do the next one. Oftentimes, and this is why meditation works so well, is that many of us, if we get still enough and present enough, all of a sudden we start to have the concept of going deep within. Then we start to eliminate righteousness and judgment. Now, the tricky thing is in meditation, most of us literally have to go somewhere else and we lose ourselves in our lives. So therefore, our ability to translate that presence into your real world is a bit of a challenge. And that's where you lose the concept of your purpose. So what I encourage each of you to do, if you have an amazing meditation practice or you don't, it doesn't matter. How do you feel in that meditative state? And if you're not meditating right now, think of a time where you were extremely present. A lot of times it's in sports. Sometimes it's in a relationship. Sometimes it's watching something on television that you just got so still in that you were unmoved. What did that feeling feel like for you? For some of us, it's playing video games It's being able to be so present in something that you get into that meditative state. It doesn't matter how you do it. What matters is that feeling that you have, not the emotion, but the feeling. The feeling is where it centers yourself in your body. And once you can tap into that feeling, it starts to expand itself from an energetic framework in order to adjust itself through all of those other dimensions, and it will shift the vibration. Think about it like tuning an orchestra. Once the orchestra starts to tune itself, the music sounds extremely harmonious. But if one or two instruments is off, this is like the dimensions in your life, all of a sudden it sounds really chaotic. It doesn't mean that in the fourth dimension you're not figuring it out. But if you're really present and unable to integrate, there's some problems there. If you can't step into your process of initiation, then you've also got issues there, right? If you can't go deep within yourself, like all of a sudden something comes up and you get triggered by whatever you're going through, and you're like, oh, I don't want to go deep within myself. I don't want to face that part of me. Then you keep doing the thing and repeating the cycles. So this all requires an expansive amount of courage. David Hawkins talks about this inside of his scale, is that courage is the gateway to love. And everything, in my opinion, is love. But courage allows you to be able to move through these dimensions so that you can unify them together. And there's a framework that I have called the Wheel of Consciousness, where each one of them supports each other. It kind of looks like a spiral or a Fibonacci. But if you don't have that center point there, you can't go anywhere else. And you can fake the funk all day long and work to get into like fourth dimensional frameworks. And so many people in spiritual communities sit there and they're like, oh yeah, I'm a 5D being. I've got this whole thing figured out. And you can be there for a second. You can do some meditation, some plant medicine, some ayahuasca, whatever you want to call it. And you can kind of get into that space. But candidly, it's going to come and bite you in the ass, because you'll be there for a minute, then you lose yourself, and then you just fall out. And this is why so many individuals on their spiritual walk literally end up all over the place. They can't monetize what they're doing. They start cults. They end up all over the place. No judgment in it. I mean, everybody has to go through different versions so that some of us can see it and figure out what we don't want to do. And I'll be honest with you, there was a point in my life that I had created a little mini cult, and I was a spiritual asshole. I was living in this 5D space. I was losing money like crazy. I lived that life, and I was completely unintegrated, out of integrity. I rarely initiated anything. I could think of all the beautiful things in life. I could talk the game of the 5D. I could sit there and tell you that I had no judgment on anything and everything was all one, but then I'd be in my space of righteousness, literally judging everybody. And a lot of you on that journey are there, and that's okay. But the fact that you're hearing this message means that you know how to break out of it. And so this is that sixth dimension, is being able to really ground those first five, and then taking those first five and then hearing and feeling your purpose, knowing it, walking in it, and being so unapologetic about it that it bleeds itself into every part of your life. Like, I have a marketing agency. There's other business that I do. I'm into different investments and crypto and everything. But I'm telling you right now, I start meetings with breath work, okay? And it's not because it's a woo-woo thing to do. It's because my thing is let's center the meeting and get in tune together. I literally talk about this stuff in meetings all day long. I am sitting there candidly going into traumatic patterns of my team to figure out how we're repeating our parental cycles so that we can step into abundant frameworks with each other. I'm understanding and breaking down people's names into what numerology it is, so I understand what that person means to me from a dimensional framework and what that means for themselves. What gift are they to me? Because if I know their number, how they show up the way that they do, what that specifically means, then I can stay in tune of why I created that person in my life from a divine perspective. And they are part of my purpose, and I'm part of their purpose. And then I can also make sure that I'm honoring that version of me in them. Now let's drop into the seventh dimension really quick. And this one, if you understand the 7 days of creation, the 7 hermetic principles, the 7 chakras of the body, the 7 colors of the rainbow, 7's a really magical number, because in the 7, it is the bridge from going from I, which we just talked about all the things about you, to we. When you have the ability to master this concept of the 7th dimension, you then start to move yourself away from self. And I have a shirt on right now. This is Annihilate Me, because it's the me concept is gone. The me concept just completely fades. And then what I do is I go into this whole concept of we. Instead of saying I am affirmations, I'm saying we are affirmations. I am pulling the past, present, future versions of myself together. I am looking at myself in full, what they call in quantum physics, superposition, every possibility of myself that could exist, and I love every version of it. And then I'm choosing the one that is aligned with my purpose, and I'm healing the ones that are not aligned with my purpose so that those end up serving the one. Now imagine this. This is actually a really cool way of thinking about this. There is one version of you that is unified with the all. That one version of you is walking through a divine door with every step. It is creating magnified energy with every breath, with every thought, and it is in full harmony in its purpose. Now, there are infinite versions of you that are not in that purpose. And those infinite versions of you are there to serve you. There are all these little minions that live behind Sean that are never going to be the one. They are version A, B, C, D, all the way through infinity. And when I recognize them and love them, not because they're broken, not because they're out of harmony, but because I would not be me if they were not there. The version of myself that could have been homeless, the version of myself that could have been incarcerated forever, the version of myself that is a egomaniac billionaire, the version of myself that is a horrific womanizer, the version of myself that is a horrible father. All these versions of myself, they sit behind me now. They are there to serve me because I am looking at them and I am healing them from the frequency that I am now. And that frequency that I am now is the one because I walk in my purpose. I am in that sixth dimension. And when I recognize that, now you take this and you say, okay, how do I bridge it from I to we? The we is all of us back there, and they power me forward, okay? They push me up when I might be falling down because they say, hey, you're not me. You're not that version of me. You are not us. And we know that you're better than us. And you've shown me who you can be. And you show me that you can stand in your purpose. And you show me that you can be present. And all we're here to do is serve you because that's what it is. That is that Satan get behind me bit. Because it's everything that is out of alignment, that has missed the mark, that is here to serve us so that we could become fully abundant and fully unified with the all. It's a really powerful way to look at it. And that seventh dimension is when we bring all of it together and we walk in those laws in the days of creation and all of the chakra alignments in our body. We are able to take every color of the rainbow, every continent. There's 7 continents, there's 7 oceans, all of these sevens, and we merge it together. This is the world we've created for ourselves. It is literally built off of the number 7. And when we do this, I'm telling you, the most beautiful shit shows up because then you translate yourself into the 8th and 9th dimensions. And I'm going to rapidly go through those and we'll have deeper conversations around what 8th and 9th means because most of us aren't there. I'm not there, but I understand them a little bit. The 8th dimension is when you see the world through your eyes and the eyes of everybody else. You accept everything. You're here to heal everything. You see all of those mini versions that you have of yourself that are behind you, pushing you forward behind everybody else. You inspire them to be the one. You inspire them to be the hero. You inspire them because you see you through their eyes and you are them and they are you. It's like Professor X in Cerebro when he can see every version of every person all at one time. But the crazy thing about this is you see that, but it's everybody becoming that Professor X, seeing all of it all at one time. And if you're not grounded in self and you don't understand that you even have all these mini minions behind you, pushing you forward, helping you to become the one and continue to stay in the rhythm of the one, getting into that space is like, would blow your mind because it would push anybody into a state of madness. Because how is it possible that you could see yourself through every version of everything that ever existed all at one time and then stand in that if you don't have integration and grounding, if you don't understand the depth of yourself, if you can't be present, if you are in a state of righteousness? Because then what happens is you would lose your mind judging every thought and everything that's happening in every version of every person around you. But this is how God views us. This is how the divine views us. This is how Source views us, is like that. And then the 9th dimension is the all's source, God's plan for everybody, for all of it, all of creation. all beings, whatever exists that could possibly ever exist, every thought, every peep, every squeak, every sound, every sniffle, everything that could have ever possibly existed is the plan for it all. And that's why the 6 and the 9 are flipped upside down, because there's the plan for you and then there's the plan for the all. And what's most interesting about the number 9 is it's the only number that you add to itself that stays within itself. It is a full process and concept of completion. And that 9th dimensional framework is extremely special. I couldn't even fathom what that is. I've done a little Bufo and Toad and shot myself out there for about 5 to 10 seconds. But that in itself, you can't bring that back and put it into words. But what I can say is that we all are that collectively. But all we have to do individually in this space is know what our purpose is. If we get to that number 6 as a collective, and we can understand how we go from I to we and just start talking in we statements, your affirmation should be we are. When you start thinking about your relationship, it's about the we. When you start understanding how you fix yourself, it is about the we. It is no I in this world anymore. The I is a state of separation. But when you take the we and turn it into the one, that is when things become magical. Because imagine this, the one does not disclude the we. The one holds it all. The one is being propped up by all of these versions of yourself that are out of harmony that help you become the most harmonious version. It's when you honor and you bring them in and you love every single version of yourself that those little versions of yourself come and support you, and you get full from that. And you've got all these helpers of you that are there along the way, and then you translate that into this 7th dimension and you bring all those laws into life. And on the next video, we're going to go deeper into the Hermetic laws, those 7 laws that help us move from that state of I to that state of we. And there's a lot of information out there about Hermetic laws. You could read different books, but what I've found is that most of them don't create practical applications for your everyday life. And yeah, it's great to say the universe is mental and the mind of the all, and the thoughts become things, and law of correspondence, as above, so below. But how does that practically show up? How can you take those principles one by one and ground them? And when you can do that and integrate it across this dimensional framework, I'm telling you, it becomes really magical. And we've gone through these first 9 dimensions, and this is our stable ground. Once you understand these principles and you start seeing angel numbers and numbers show up in your life, you could take that and start applying these concepts around dimensions into what you're seeing. Once you start taking names of people in your life and experiences that you're having, and you bring that into numerology, and you break that number down into its digital root, there's no accident what that will mean in your life. People will start to think that you're like a little psychic, that you're, that you've got, and people will start to think, and as you start to understand this, people will start to think, well, how does he know all this stuff about me? And think that I'm a little bit psychic. But it's not even that. It's the fact that you're just reading the code. This code was left here for us. It's in every ancient text. It's in all religion. It is literally in New Age mysticism. It's in quantum physics. It's in when you break down Fibonacci. I mean, I don't care where you go with it. It is everywhere. And we are going to continue to walk on this path to understand how to read this code. And when you can read the code, you'll no longer need a psychic. You no longer need a guru. You will know all the answers, and you will be able to walk in your purpose and change this life that we're in collectively. Thank you, and I love you.